Hi, welcome to Moreauknows. Today we're going to be learning about the beginning of life on Earth. The essential standard that we are going to be looking at today is Bio 4.1. We're going to be able to understand how biological molecules are essential to the survival of living organisms. But to learn about that, we need to know what these biological molecules are and how they are formed at the beginning of life on Earth. Early Earth had a lot of different molecules in the early atmosphere. One was water. The other is nitrogen. We had carbon dioxide, and we also had methane, which is CH4, methane. And we also had ammonium, NH3, and we also had carbon monoxide, so that's just CO. And we had hydrogen. In the early atmosphere, we had no complex molecules. They're all inorganic molecules. So inorganic molecules were not made from living things. So these are simple molecules like CO2 or CH4 or H2 that do not have a lot of carbon in them. Organic molecules have large chains of carbon in them. So we have things like carbohydrates, lipids, things like that, which are very complex molecules compared to these very simple molecules that we see here. So knowing the inorganic to organic, this one's made from this is non-living origins, and this is from living origins. The inorganic molecules are going to be very simple, and organic molecules are going to be very complex. And these organic molecules are going to have chains or carbon based. Okay? So, if we just had these molecules here, how do we get to where we are today, where we have complex living organisms such as plants, animals, humans, fish, and all of that? Well, these had to have evolved into more complex molecules. And to do that, we need to figure out how or why. This guy named Urey, he came up with this idea of this primordial soup that we had here in the oceans. And with this electricity and this lightning from all of the gases and energy and volcanoes that we had this lightning come down and actually hit these molecules and change them in a certain way to create more complex molecules. So we call this evolution of molecules. And because of Urey's hypothesis, there were some guys that wanted to test this. These guys' names were Miller and Urey. Miller and Urey had a way to test Urey's hypothesis. And by doing this, he was able to both of them were able to create a mini water cycle. That's what I would call it, a mini water cycle. And so here you have the oceans, and the oceans would evaporate out. And so when they evaporate up into the atmosphere, they go into a cloud. So here would be our nice little fluffy cloud. And right here he would have electrodes with electricity. So this would bridge a gap and create an electric spark. This would be the energy that would be needed to change. Well, in this cloud we need to have some precipitation. So the precipitation would fall into this area right here where we have cold water coming in and condensing this whole area right here, which would lead to water and raindrops. Well, this water and raindrops would come back into our ocean, and once it did that, it would go through the cycle all over again. So this is a water cycle with energy involved. And so when we started off with ammonium, carbon monoxide, methane, water, and hydrogen, we eventually got out, after running this for a couple days, Miller and Urey found that in this soup here, it turned brown, which was really weird because they started off with just plain water, and now it is brown. So they went and they tested what was in this water, and they found amino acids, okay? They found lipids, and they also found carbohydrates. And so when they found these molecules, they actually had proven Oparin's hypothesis correct by listing these molecules only at the beginning and then coming out at the end of a couple days with these complex organic molecules, which was the first step into understanding where these complex molecules came at the beginning of life. Miller and Urey created 4 steps that needed to happen to start life as we know it today. So the first thing that they had to have were inorganic matter. So this was your hydrogen, your water, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane, CH4, ammonium, NH3, nitrogen gas, and that was about it. So these molecules here would have had to have been the basis for our life. And so here, from these inorganic matter, now we have simple organic monomers. So monomers, mono means one. And so in monomers, you only have one single chain. So if you had one amino acid, you would just have one. They wouldn't be connected in a row. We went from inorganic to organic monomers through the process that Miller and Urey experimented with. Then we started to create polymers. So from monomers, you get chains of those and create polymers. So poly means many. And then we start getting protocells. So protocells are just membrane-bound areas where these lipids turned into a lipid bilayer and started creating protocells. So just areas or pockets of nothingness. And until we get to cells, there was no DNA present. But once we have cells, cells are the basis of living things, and that needs to have DNA present inside the cells. So once we have cells and DNA, that is the basis of all living things. And then we have hypothesized on how life could have been created. To compare the early and modern atmosphere, the beginning there was no oxygen. Now we have lots of oxygen. That's how all of us breathe. We get that oxygen through plants, through photosynthesis. In the early atmosphere, we had no ozone layer. This, in turn, now today we do have an ozone layer, which actually helps us from not having too much UV radiation come down and destroy our cells. We do have some UV radiation come down, but not as much as in the early atmosphere. We didn't have a lot of land in the early atmosphere, but now we have a lot more, even though the ocean still covers 71% of our Earth. And at the early Earth, we had a lot of carbon dioxide and ammonia. Now we have a lot less carbon dioxide and ammonia. There were intense lightning storms in early Earth, and now we have less lightning storms. So these are some big changes that have happened between the early Earth and the modern Earth that allow us to live today. Thank you for watching Moreauknows. Now you do.